Hello, everybody. I hope you're all keeping well still. And it's time for part 13 of To School Through the Fields. This chapter is called A One-Way Ticket. Children who die very young leave a warm memory in the hearts of those who loved them. It is as if their candle of life, because it glows for such a short time, shines especially bright. Connie was the youngest of our family, born in the autumn of my parents' childbearing years. He was a long-legged, fine-boned little boy with silken blonde hair that touched his shoulders. His birth brought great joy. If nothing else, after 5 daughters, he was a welcome change. An imaginative, sensitive child, he blossomed in the adoring love of this predominantly female household. My older brother at this time had left the free world of childhood behind and was finding his feet in the quicksands of adolescence. There was just a year between Connie and me, so we grew together in early childhood like a pair of twin lambs. In my earliest memory, I'm sitting on a warm flagstone outside our house while Connie sits in his pram under a huge palm tree. The palm tree dominated our garden, and its branches brushed against the window panes, filling the rooms at that end of the house with moving shadows. Connie and I spent our days in the grove behind the house. The others were gone to school, so we were left to our own devices. We played imaginary games beneath the trees where the ground was soft with the fallen leaves and pine needles of many years. One old tree had a huge hole in its trunk, and into this we sat and pretended that we were travelling to many strange places. Because we could not see the top of this tree, as it seemed to go up and up and up, we believed that it grew into heaven. Heaven in those days was very real. The sky was our roof and the ground floor of heaven. Up there were God and the angels and our cat that had died the year before. Everything that left our world finished up in heaven, and we never questioned that it was a one-way ticket. After all, if heaven was where we all hoped to end up, who would think of coming back? We fed the ducks and the chickens every day, and the baby calves were our favourites, though all the young animals around the yard were very much loved by us. We often visited Bill at the top of the hill, where he told us stories and gave us rides on the donkey. We could ramble through the fields and be missing for hours, and nobody had need to worry because the countryside was free and safe. The only disappearance that ever created panic happened one wet winter's morning when Connie went missing. The stream at the bottom of our garden had turned into an angry torrent of floodwater that backed up the garden and overflowed into the grove behind the house. Connie was nowhere to be found, and the terror was that he had fallen into the floodwater. A thorough search proved that this was unlikely, but the possibility could not yet be overruled. Every corner of the house and farmyard was searched to no avail. Most of this consternation sailed over my head, and I decided that I would visit our sheepdog in the hay barn, who, the previous week, had had a litter of cuddly puppies. And there, curled up with the new mother, was Connie, sound asleep, almost indistinguishable from the pups who were draped all over him. At night, we slept together in a big bed that had a high, old-fashioned timber base and headboard. The fluffy tick, filled with soft goose and duck down, collected over the years from the Christmas pluckings, provided warmth and fun too as we stood on the timber headboard and dived into its comforting fullness. It had sunken pathways and fairy tunnels and countless hidden possibilities. Going to bed early when sleep was the least of our interests, we turned the bed into a playground peopled by whoever and whatever took our fancy. We scratched pictures on the headboard, and Lowry men and women pranced around our pillows. Nobody cautioned about damaging the paintwork. There were no dolls and teddies to cuddle in bed, as these were the war years and such luxuries were non-existent, but never missed. Instead, our resourceful mother provided us with 2 little statues, one of St. Teresa and the other baby Jesus. There was no shortage of statues in Irish homes at that time, so every night we took our battered and chipped and much-loved statues to bed. Once a week, my mother left home to visit my grandmother, who lived a few miles down the road. She was never missing for very long, but home lost some of its warmth when she was gone, and if she was not back by bedtime, my older sister Frances did the needful. This was the case one winter's night, so my sister changed us into our nightclothes and, lighting a candle, led us upstairs to bed. The older children were trusted with candles in their bedrooms, but the younger ones settled for moonlight once they were tucked up in bed. On that particular night, however, the moon did not oblige, so we were in complete darkness. Tucked up snugly in our comfortable feather tick, we did not mind, but just as we were dozing off to sleep, I realised that we had no statue to keep us company. We knocked on the wooden floor to summon help from the lower regions, and when Frances came in answer to our call, we explained about our statues. She went in search of them. After a long time she came back and tucked the statues under the bedclothes beside us. I ran my finger over baby Jesus and thought that he was a strange shape. Then Connie's sleepy voice whispered to me in the darkness, "St. Teresa has a very long neck tonight." However, we were too tired to investigate any further and drifted off to sleep. We awoke the next morning to discover that instead of our 2 statues, which had gone missing, we were holding on to 2 bottles of porter. I got my first doll the following Christmas, and Connie got a little cloth man he called Patsy. That morning I awoke, and when I moved my legs, something clanked off the bottom of the bed. It was a doll with a wear face, and we named her Katie Maria. We had many hours of fun with our new friends, Katie Maria and Patsy, but we did not abandon our 2 old pals who stood guard on our bedside table. When summer came round again, we returned to the Grove and our treehouse. We lived in a child's wonderland, and the harsh face of reality had never frowned on us. But then, suddenly, an icy draught blew around us when Connie got very sick. He had been part of my day and night, sharing every childish secret, and now, suddenly, he could laugh no more. He lay still and quiet like a little bird in the middle of the feather bed. I sat on the floor and played with Patsy and Katie Maria. I talked endlessly to Connie, feeling that even though he couldn't answer, he would know somehow that I was there. The doctor came every day, and I shrank back into the corner while he examined Connie. My mother and the doctor had long discussions, and I could see the pain in my mother's face. Then, one day after the doctor had been, my mother told me that Connie would have to go into hospital, and that he might get better, but she was not sure. Looking into my mother's stricken face, I feared that Connie would never come back. Since he had got sick, I had felt that something terrible was going to happen, and now the certainty formed a hard lump of terror in my heart. I went up into the Grove and sat into our old tree. A black car came into the yard and through the trees. I watched my mother come out with Connie in her arms. He was wrapped up in a white blanket, but my mother's face was whiter still. I stayed in the treehouse all day, feeling close to Connie there. Tears never came to my eyes. Crying was something you did when you cut your finger. This was beyond all tears. Finally, as dusk came, I heard the pine needles crunching as someone approached. It was Bill. He sat outside the tree as he could not fit inside, just sat saying nothing while the tears ran down his face. I crept out of the tree and onto his lap, putting my arms around his neck. And so we sat, Bill and I, locked together in our terrible grief. I silently, while my dear friend shuddered with great, heartbroken sobs. The next day, Connie died. I did not feel any worse because it was as if it had already happened. I actually felt better because I decided that now that he had left the hospital and gone to heaven, he would come back. Every day I checked the treehouse a couple of times in case he would be there. When this did not work out, I decided it was back to the bedroom he would come. Our little room had been stripped bare and the curtains drawn, and a sulphur candle stood guttering and spluttering on our bedside table. The nuns in the hospital had given my mother a relic of St. Teresa and a waxen pink rose, which were also on the table. I hated that pink rose. In some way I had come to the conclusion that God had taken Connie and sent back the stupid rose. One day, when I peeped in to see if Connie was there, I could stand it no longer, so I caught the rose and tore it up petal by petal. My refusal to accept the fact that Connie was gone must have added greatly to my mother's anguish at that time. One day, in order to try to solve the problem, she asked me if I would like to visit his grave. I was delighted and tore upstairs for Patsy and a bag of Connie's favourite sweets that I kept hidden under our bed. It took a long time to realise that heaven was, indeed, a one-way ticket. Years afterwards, I opened the door of a room in a strange house, and the smell of a sulphur candle hit me with such an impact that a memory box in my subconscious snapped open, and I was once again back in that little room. I stood rooted to the floor as tears streamed down my face, while some of the anguish of those days washed over me. That was a sad one. Slán.